The invitation arrived on a Tuesday, printed on thick, cream-colored paper that smelled faintly of dust and pine. The estate of Eleanor Vance cordially requests your presence for the final viewing and disposition of contents at Stillwater, Lake Serene. August 22nd. For a full minute, Sam held the paper without breathing. Stillwater. They hadn't called it that in 20 years. To him and his sister, it had always been just the lake house. The drive up was a journey through a tunnel of his own past. Every bend in the highway peeled back a year. By the time the gravel road crunched under his tires, his knuckles were white on the steering wheel. And there it was, perched on the granite edge of the water like a weathered bird, the cedar-shingled house with the big porch. Its windows clouded like cataract eyes. His sister, Mara, was already there, leaning against her car. She looked like their mother, same sharp chin, same way of holding a sadness close to the chest. They hugged, a stiff, perfunctory thing. The vultures are inside, she said, nodding toward the open front door. Aunt Gloria, and some cousin from Dad's side I've never met. They're already arguing over the silver. The inside was a museum of faded glory. Sunlight sliced through the dusty air, illuminating the floral sofa where Grandma Eleanor would read them ghost stories, the hearth where they'd roasted marshmallows during summer thunderstorms. Every surface held a relic, a chipped ceramic loon. A stack of National Geographic magazines from the 80s, the faded patchwork quilt from the back of the porch swing. Sam wandered, a ghost in his own memories. He trailed his fingers over the spines of the water-warped books on the shelf. In the kitchen, he opened the old mustard-yellow fridge out of habit, half expecting to find the bottle of grape soda he'd left there 2 decades ago. It was empty, humming a lonely tune. The realtor, a woman with a too bright smile, clapped her hands. "All right, folks. We'll start the tagging in the living room. Remember, anything not claimed by the family will be sold or donated by month's end." It felt like a dissection. Aunt Gloria descended on a set of cut crystal glasses. The unknown cousin laid claim to a ugly brass anchor. Mara quietly tagged the writing desk, the one their grandfather had carved. Sam felt a rising panic, a sense that they were not just distributing objects, but erasing the very code of their shared history. He slipped away, down the hall to the back bedrooms. His old room, the bunk room, smelled of damp wood and adolescent boy. The top bunk where he'd slept was still made up with the scratchy wool blanket. And there, scratched into the pine headboard, was the crude heart, S.A. L.J. He'd carved it the summer he was 14, the summer of Laura Jean. The memory washed over him, vivid and brutal, the heat of July. Laura Jean, the girl from the cottage down the shore, with freckles across her nose and a laugh that sounded like the lake lapping at stones. They'd spent the days in a sun-dazzled haze, swimming out to the raft, sharing stolen beers behind the boathouse, talking about everything and nothing in the velvety dark on the dock. He had been utterly, desperately in love for the first time. Then, the fight. A stupid, overheated argument about something forgotten. Harsh words. "I don't want to see you anymore, Sam." Her face, cold and closed. He'd run back here, to this room, heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. He'd taken his scout knife and gouged the heart into the wood, a permanent monument to his pain. He'd vowed, through hot, angry tears, that he would never feel that way again. He would be guarded, careful, safe. Standing there now, a man of 37, Sam traced the rough grooves of the carving. He saw with sudden, painful clarity how that teenage vow had woven itself into the fabric of his life. The cautious relationships, the emotional walls, the way he'd let potential love slip away rather than risk a fraction of that summer's hurt. He had left his heart here, in more ways than one. He had left his courage, found your teenage shrine. Mara stood in the doorway, a faint smile on her lips. She walked in and sat on the lower bunk, the springs creaking in protest. "I was such an idiot," Sam whispered, his voice thick. "You were 14, she said softly. "We all left things here, Sam." She looked out the window toward the lake. I left my voice here, she said, so quietly he almost didn't hear. Remember that summer I wanted to go to art school? And Dad? Dad said it was a frivolous dream. Get a real degree, he said. We had that huge argument on the porch. I screamed and cried. And then I just shut up. I tagged along with his business major plan. I left the girl who was brave enough to fight for her dreams right there on that porch swing. The silence between them was no longer empty, but full of shared understanding. They had both come to this place and left pieces of themselves behind, thinking they were lightening their load for the journey ahead. Instead, they'd been limping ever since. The realtor's voice echoed down the hall. We're wrapping up in the front. Sam looked at the carving, then at his sister. A resolve, fierce and clear, crystallized in him. He walked out of the bunk room, down the hall, past the murmuring relatives in the living room, and out onto the porch. He went straight to the rusty metal tool locker beside the steps. He rummaged past ancient fishing line and rusty pliers until his hand closed around the cool, smooth wood of the handle. He walked back inside, the hatchet in his hand. Aunt Gloria gasped. Samuel. What in heaven's name? He didn't answer. He walked past them, back to the bunk room. Mara followed, her eyes wide. Sam? He stood before the headboard. He raised the hatchet. With one solid, cathartic thunk, he buried the blade into the wood, right through the center of the carved heart. He wrenched it free and did it again. And again. Splinters flew. With each blow, he wasn't destroying a memory, he was freeing it. He was chopping down the first wall he'd ever built. When he was done, breath heaving, he turned to Mara. A chunk of the headboard, the heart now obliterated, lay at his feet. Your turn, he said, holding out the hatchet. She stared at it. Then at him. A slow, determined light came into her eyes. She took the handle. She didn't go to the bunk room. She walked out to the living room, past their stunned relatives, and stood before the large, hideous oil painting of a gloomy forest that their father had loved. The one that had hung in a place of honor, silencing all other aesthetic choices. I always hated this thing, she declared to the room, and she swung. The canvas tore with a satisfying crunch. She laughed, a wild, free sound Sam hadn't heard since they were kids, and swung again. They spent the next hour not tagging items to take, but systematically, joyfully, destroying the symbols of their old prisons. The vase that was always too precious to touch. The ugly chair no one was allowed to sit in. They were not vandalizing, they were excavating. Exhausted, sweaty, and grinning, they finally collapsed on the dusty porch steps at sunset, watching the lake turn to liquid gold. The hatchet lay between them. We're not taking any of it, are we? Mara asked, already knowing the answer. No, Sam said, looking at the peaceful water. We're taking ourselves back. They left the lake house as the first stars appeared. They didn't look back at the structure of wood and memory. They carried no boxes. No silver, no cut crystal. They drove away lighter, having finally reclaimed what they had truly left behind all those years ago, the unguarded boy who knew how to love bravely, and the fierce girl who knew how to fight for her own light. They were taking them home.